Good morning and welcome to day two of our inaugural Ignite series showcasing the game-changing technologies and innovations that are transforming how we view real estate and investment opportunities. Today's program, Unlocking Innovation, Proptech and the Future of Corporate Real Estate. We'll discuss the new Proptech innovations and amenities that are being leveraged to take workplace experiences to the next level. For those of you who were not able to attend yesterday's opening of Ignite, we made some very exciting announcements, recognizing the critical role that PropTech is playing in driving the industry forward. Commercial Observer will be expanding our technology coverage with new products and services, including a weekly PropTech newsletter and events like this one, focused on innovation and CRE tech. We are also really thrilled to welcome Phil Russo to our editorial team as our special correspondent for PropTech. Phil will be joining us again for tomorrow's final day of Ignite, so please be sure to tune in. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank our 2021 Ignite sponsors, Cadre, Camber Creek, Cherry, Eden Health, Fried Frank, HQO, International Well Building Institute, Placer AI, and STO Building Group. And thank you to today's association partners, GNYCUC, NYC Builds Bio Plus, and Women in PropTech. A couple of quick house cleaning items before we get started. All attendees will be muted throughout the event, but we encourage you to submit any questions you may have for the speakers throughout the program. You can do this by entering them into the Q&A box in your control panel. The moderators will reserve time at the end of each panel to address as many questions as possible. And if you're looking to connect with today's speakers, let us know. You will receive a live poll at the conclusion of each panel asking if you'd like to connect with today's speakers. We'll pass along your contact information to any speakers you select. And now for our first discussion, our keynote, Elevating Real Estate Through Accelerated Innovation. Allow me to welcome my old pal, Jonathan Mechanic, partner and chairman of the real estate department for Fried Frank.
Good morning, Max. Happy to be here. Good morning, Scott. Always good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Always great to have a conversation together. So let's jump into it together. What are some of the most important areas or gaps that you think technology can help the real estate community solve for?
Yeah, so first, I just want to also just commend the Commercial Observer for its leadership on not only just the now delving into the PropTech space, but even through the whole pandemic of being out there and creating channels of communication for all of us in the industry to come together. So Max, to you and your team, great job, and keep that up. And John, always great to have conversations with you. So the question is to what is the biggest gap in real estate? And I think it's pretty simple, which is sort of ubiquitous, which is it's data. That when you think about the knowledge economy, data is the oil of that knowledge economy. And so, we have for so many, decades, our industry has operated without the level of data that one would expect to enable us to actually operate our buildings more effectively, service our customers more effectively and wholesomely and fulsomely, and be able to operate our businesses more effectively in terms of all the processes. And data is the raw material that once you have all of that, enables you to build upon it and build the types of tools and functionality that enables you to make that data actionable.
So what role do you think leveraging technology will play in driving a more full-scale return to the office? As I think all of us in the real estate industry and industries as a whole are focused on that return to the office, which we think kind of gives a lifeblood to the cities and central business districts that we live in.
So I think, particularly, even as the latest news on the Delta variant, right? In this world, the focus on health and wellness of our buildings, our community, how we operate in our buildings is of prominent importance to bringing people back to the buildings without having a sense of anxiety and giving them a sense of comfort. And, I sort of think of this analogous to post 9/11, where all of a sudden, we had a city that for the first time had to deal with the threat of terrorism in our own backyard. And while it didn't go away, we built in infrastructure to enable us to move forward and coexist with this new threat. I think the same is true with COVID, and if it's not 19, it's COVID 22 or whatever variant it is. We are now cognizant of the fact that in this interconnected world that we live in, the spread of diseases like COVID, have tremendous impacts on life and livelihood for our cities, our families, our neighbors. And so we're going to have to use technology to help people navigate that in different ways. And whether that's using technology where people can actually understand where there might be surges of viral activity where they work or how to get to work, the air quality in one's buildings, humidity levels in one's buildings, implementing technology that when you're coming to the workplace that you're able to actually determine who's been vaccinated, who hasn't been vaccinated, who might have a fever, who might not have a fever. And so I think there's a lot of this infrastructure that's been put in place on health and wellness is not going away. And I think we're all going to be pursuing it in different degrees, in terms of where we are, in terms of the public health issue. But this last week was another wake-up call that COVID's here. It's not going away. And so, when we began to sort of dismantle some of our infrastructure we put in place for the heat of COVID to bring people back to workplace, I told my team, leave it all ready to go back up because we may need it in a day's notice, right? And so I think that's something that's important. And then the second piece is, as people come back to the workplaces, the workplace of post-COVID is going to be very different than the workplace pre-COVID, and how people work and what they're sensitive to and what they're trying to get out of the workplace is different. So I think using technology to create tools so that people can be more productive in the workplace, can have a greater sense of engagement and interaction with their team members, and then also be able to take a step back to evaluate how productive and effective those times in the workplace are versus working remotely.
So what would you say are the top lessons that you took away from the experiences that we've had in 2020, 2021, and kind of what we may see going forward, as you said, with some of the resurgence, in particular parts of the country? Obviously, we're doing better in New York, but we're seeing it in elsewhere on a more extreme basis. And so I think all those things would be helpful in terms of what we think going forward that we should have taken away from what we've learned.
Listen, I think the first thing is that the playbooks of the past aren't going to be what works in the future. So we need to develop the playbooks of the future in terms of how we think about operating our businesses and our properties in that instance, because COVID has changed so much of what was and made us cognizant of so much. The second thing I think is the interconnectivity that I described earlier. We've all talked about living in a global environment and how that plays itself through. But that's not only globally in terms of here, but the ecosystem of our city itself, which is that to the extent that you have something like COVID and people flee the cities, flee the office buildings, what's that mean to the small businesses, the restaurants, our downtowns, our neighborhoods? And so being more cognizant of that interconnectivity along the way. And then I think like again, post 9/11 as an example, I think as we rebuild and trying to rebuild more equitable, more sustainable communities going forward, I think we need to think about two things. One is looking at even our midtown areas as more mixed use, live, work, play 24/7 types environments. So it's not just beholden to the commercial workforce that comes in and exits, but that the small business and restaurants have the ability to live here, just like downtown. Now we go after 9/11, people are out there with their kids in baby carriages, and it's a 24/7 community. I think we've got to think about rebuilding Midtown that way. I think also we should learn and take advantage of some of the lessons of things that were challenges before, with affordability of housing, congestion on our streets, stress on our transit system. And so there is remote work offers us an opportunity to reset that a little bit, and to think about not just New York City as just the city, but as the region. And sort of like to use the terms of superstar city, more of a superstar region as we go forward, and think about how people can actually work remotely at the right times, or come into work at different flexible times, to remove some of that strain in our congestion, or to be able to live a little bit further away to find more affordable housing. And I think if we think in that regional context, our region and our city will thrive much more successfully as we recover. And then the last one obviously is that once again there's been a situation where the city's obituary was prematurely written, and once again the city proved to be one of the most resilient, if not the most resilient, cities in the world of coming back. And we've seen this now with the record surge of leasing in the multifamily sector. We had over 9,000 leases in the city, each of these last number of months, and the same thing on records on the for sale home markets. People want to be in New York City, and starting in January, they were coming back, and they're coming back in droves, and the activity and energy is building. And when the talent's here, the companies will be here, and then the retail will come alive, the restaurant comes alive, and we get that virtuous cycle that's driven its growth going forward. And the last thing I just want to note, which is I think an important piece here, is that we also saw with the pandemic that our underserved communities were hit much worse than the broader communities. And as we're recovering from this, and while it appears that we have this great V-shaped economic recovery on the surface, below the surface we have a K-shape where a large part of our community and economy has been dislocated and are not participating in that recovery. So while we may have record stock prices and record earnings on one hand, we also still have people that are more food insecure, haven't had access to broadband connectivity, so their kids haven't gotten the education over the last 18 months that they would need, and the jobs they may have been going to don't exist anymore today. And so I think it's critical for us as a city, going back to that point about this being this interconnected ecosystem, to take accountability for making sure that the inequality that's widened is something that we all intentionally address, and don't neglect just because we're seeing the broader economy recovering as quickly as it is.
So we are going to have a new administration coming into the city at the start of the year, and given some of these lessons, if you were having a tete-a-tete with mayor or new members of that administration, what were some of the thoughts you'd share with them in terms of things that they might be looking to do, in terms of what the city ought to be doing, in terms of trying to create some of those changes and trying to address some of those concerns that you just raised?
Yeah, so assuming, as we all would expect, Eric Adams is our next mayor, I think one of the things that give me some sense of encouragement is that Eric ran on quality of life and public safety being of prominent importance. I think his words are, you can't have public safety is a prerequisite for prosperity, right? And so focusing on public safety, focusing on quality of life, focusing on making sure that our streets, our subways, are safe and feel safe, and the perception of safety, which is as important as being safe, is dealt with, because that's foundational to the health and wellness and vibrancy of our city, and people feeling comfortable coming back. The second thing I would say is that not approach it that this is a tale of two cities. We're one city. Unite the city around a vision of a more equitable, more sustainable, more prosperous city for everyone, and bring in the business leaders, the civic leaders, elected officials, philanthropic organizations, to come together, united behind that vision, to try to address these challenges. Our challenges on homelessness and our affordable housing and the other issues that we're facing in this city are really are structural in nature. They've been here for a very, very long time, and they're not just going to go away naturally. We're all going to have to work and make an extra effort to resolve them. So bring us all together as one to resolve it versus more of a divisive approach, which I think we've had the sentiment of in the prior administration.
So what do you think are the tenant expectations as they return to the office into the city, and how best should owners be addressing?
So, it's interesting. We have been back in our office since June of last year, right? And I remember when we first, right. So you too. For those who have, you remember those early days for yourself and your colleagues. There's a sense of anxiety, right? Because we've been staying at home. You're anxious about the public health situation. You've created new habits at home that you had to now break to come back to the workplace. So there's that sense of anxiety the first 2 or 3 weeks. When you get over that, then there's a sense of excitement about being back engaged with your peers, and then all of a sudden a realization of how much you missed in terms of communicating, ideation, a sense of being a part of something bigger, a sense of purpose and community that you can't get in this two-dimensional way of interacting. And so I think that as people come back, recognize it's okay to feel that sense of anxiety, because what we did this a year ago, imagine now, John, that people had a whole nother year where they were at home, and it's almost like these hobbies and practices and approaches become calcified in how they live their lives, and now we're trying to break it and bring people back to the workplace, right? So I think you need to go in knowing that it's going to take a more intentional effort to break those habits that you developed to come back to the workplace, but that in a very short order of time, you're going to realize how important it is to be back. The second thing is that we all realize as leaders that there's new tools. The genie's out of the bottle on things like video conferencing, and that we need to use them to create a more flexible work environment, so we get the best balance of work life and home life while still maintaining productivity as an organization. And so I think that the concept of hybrid work or flexible work is going to be something that we're all going to be experimenting with, and I think whether it's done formally, where organizations pick certain days, or it's done less formally, where there's situations where things that are happening in your personal life and you want to work remotely, people are going to be able to leverage that. And so we should try to figure out how do we set the right policies to take advantage of the new tools that we have to operate as we go forward. But the warning I'll give to everyone is, this is something that no one has figured out yet, right? So this is going to be a work in process, and we're all going to have to navigate and learn and take a step back and evaluate what's working and what's not working, and then adapt appropriately.
How much of a dialogue is there between you and your tenants? I mean, there are things that you can do as an owner. There are things that your tenants are doing vis-a-vis their employees, and it's really both management of the tenant as well as ownership in order to make the workplace hospitable, both from the building standpoint as well as the tenant space, individually. And how does that interchange or exchange take place, and what kinds of things are being done on both ends?
I would say, one of the things that we've seen historically in crises, and this one in particular, because we're all, trying to, again, navigate through uncharted territory, is the level of communication that we have with our tenants and other stakeholders has been at a much higher level than ever before. And I speak to 3 or 4 tenants a day, and they're all interested in trying to understand what are our other companies that live, work, and operate in our buildings. What are they thinking about? And so there's been a lot of collaboration and sharing of ideas as to how are we going to bring people back to the workplace and create a workplace that's an engaging workplace in a post-COVID world. And I think I think it's been the sentiment that continues to change, right? I mean, you go back and I, I keep a journal. I go read a year ago right now, people were still talking about coming back Labor Day of last year. And now we're talking about Labor Day of this year, right? And then we had
hopefully we'll be better. This one will work out.
And I think it will. And every tenant I speak to plans on coming back, right after Labor Day, or before, and they're going to be coming back, whether it's 3 days a week or 4 days a week for their team members. They all have, plans to try to figure out how to hypothesize what the right structure should be, but a recognition that they're going to have to monitor what's working and what's not working. And so I think you're going to see a much harder, we need you back in the workplace. And, it's interesting, this great resignation, as they call it, the amount of people that have left jobs for other jobs that we've seen spur in 2021, I don't think it's disconnected from the way that we've been operating for the last 16 months or so, right? Which is that if we're not personally engaged, if you're not part of a community, don't have a part of the value set of a company and interactions on a regular basis, you're basically a free agent. And so you can then decide more easily just to start switching jobs, and you lose that connectivity. And again, that's, I think, a symptom of what we have been going through, but it's just one symptom. That happens to be the one that's actually visible. But the other symptom that's also equally apparent when you dig down is that people have depleted a lot of the underlying values and relationships that capital that had been built in these organizations over years and decades, and you got to come back together to rebuild it. So the other thing that we're having a lot of conversations with our tenants about is when they bring people back, how much focus they're going to be putting on that sense of personal engagement and activating their workspaces, so that people aren't coming back and just sitting in front of their computer all day, but that they're actually engaging with their peers. They're being mentored, they're collaborating, formally and informally, programming putting in place to help encourage that type of engagement, designing spaces differently to encourage that type of engagement. So it's going to be a lot of new approaches to things, but I would think it's almost like we're going to have this period of an intense reintroduction to each other and to the work environment that's going to help us set the framework of what we then move forward and what the workplace looks like, as we get into 22 and beyond.
Switching gears for a minute, tell us about Digital Lab and what made you decide to build it.
Yeah, so in 2018, we began the process of building a digital lab where now we have over 25 data scientists, product development people, and engineers that develop products that we use at RXR. And at the same time, we have a digital ventures group which invests in other companies that have products that we think would be something that would help serve our customers, operate our buildings, or operate our business better. And the driver was sort of a realization as we had conversations with our customers that every other industry out there was going through a digital transformation. And in the real estate world, where we really saw it was in some of the more nascent, earlier Proptech companies, which had great ideas, great innovation, great creativity, but not necessarily how you would actually digitize your business itself. And so part of the labs process was to help us foundationally be in a position where we can take our company through a digital transformation, starting with indoctrinating all of our team members to basically start viewing the world through a lens of innovation. Not that this is the way it's done because it was done that way in the past, but this is the way it can be done if you take the best of what we do physically and add a digital dimension to it, what we call phygital. And so the first part was sort of behavioral management for 6 months, or behavioral change for 6 months of our team members, meeting with the people in our lab and engaging on what are the use cases that can go through that transformation. And that was, I think, a very helpful thing. The second was building the infrastructure, developing what we call data lakes, so that anything that's happening within our properties or within our company is cleaned, put in a set of governance, and put into a data lake that then becomes accessible and put in a way that's actionable later. And that's if anyone's ever done it, it's a very, very heavy lift. It took us about a year, and we're still working on a number of circumstances, because collecting data from all these different sources is not something that is all the same. Each one has a different process to actually be able to collect that data, clean the data, set the governance up. So that set us up foundationally. And then, we teamed up with Microsoft and also with McKinsey on a number of projects, thinking about first our multifamily portfolio, about how we can provide 5-star level of living and hospitality by using the combination of the physical and digital approach for our residents. And then in the office buildings, trying to think about how people interact in office buildings, and think about the Internet of Things, so that we're not just sort of monitoring what's happening online, but we're actually monitoring what's happening in space, and actually pulling that data in an anonymized way to have better visibility of what's happening in our buildings. And then when COVID hit, we were well down that road. And I literally, on March 4th, I was with Microsoft on their campus when they actually evacuated their campus and closed it down. And from that point forward, worked with them and a few of other partners, Infosys and others, and 100 team members working on building a what we call RxWell, which was a product that bring our tenants back to the workplace and our employees back to the workplace, so they were safe, felt safe, changed behaviors, monitored social distance, monitored compliance of capacity in rooms, areas where there's congestion, health and wellness of the buildings, et cetera. But in putting in that infrastructure, and to the credit of Microsoft as encouragement, everything that we invested was also predicated in having a post-COVID use case, because we realized that this is critical at a moment, but there's going to be a moment in time that we'll be able to adapt this to say, now using this data and this knowledge, how do we help people think about returning to the workplace post-COVID, which is really now what we call our WorksWell product, which helps people think about how to manage the hybrid environment. And so when they come to the workplace, they'll be in a situation of knowing who they want to meet with, knowing they're going to be there, monitoring, are they meeting with them enough on a regular basis? If you're head of HR, being able to actually do analytics online to see who actually interacts and collaborates, and try to hypothesize what cohorts should work together in the office on different days. So if you are putting in hybrid work, what you think should happen, and then monitoring what's really happening, who's coming in at the same time, who's collaborating, who's using the amenities, who's going to the programming, et cetera.
So who's using that app? Is that like the tenant management who's monitoring what's happening with his people, or individuals within the that are employees of the firm? Are they using the app, and how does that interface work?
Yeah, so there's two interfaces. There's an interface for the head of HR and facilities, which then helps manage the process, and that's the one where they'll lay in what they think is going to happen in terms of what cohorts would work, and what their expectations of hybrid work should be, and productivity should be, what's happening online, what's happening physically in the office. And then there's tools that are for the users of the space, which, besides experiential and engagement, also provides them with behavioral tools, almost thinking like how people wear, a health watch, like, where it will let them know, where they can say, okay, here's the people I want to focus on. I want to make sure when I'm in the office, I see John Mechanic is top focus. When I'm in the office, Max Gross is another person. Well, it will tell you when you're in the office, how much time did you spend around John Mechanic or around Max Gross, right? And did you meet your goals or not? Or it could tell you that you haven't
better than Steps and Fitbit, or
right, exactly.
Your Apple Watch.
Right. And it's like that. Or it could tell you, it can nudge you that if you haven't been in the office in a couple of days, and your focus groups have been there, to go to the office, right? Or it could tell you how you went to the office on the commuting, and offer you alternative ways to get to the office that would have been more productive and constructive. And so you can imagine how you can continue to lean in, to each of these different use cases. So from the user's perspective, from the worker's perspective, they're realizing that they're getting the most of the office place, and that when the workplace, and when they come, they can actually see tangible results, and they can manage themselves better to find that right, new hybrid work-life balance.
Scott, I think we're coming to the end of our segment, but I guess I would like to ask you, if we're sitting here a year from now, and I'm asking my friend Scott Reckler, okay, how did the last 12 months turn out? How do you think it was different than what we thought going into it? What do you think your response would be?
A year ago, when we finished our white paper, we concluded New York's going to come back, and like it always has. And the question was when, how long would it take, and what was it going to look like? And what I will say is, I've been, pleasantly surprised at how quickly New York City has come back, how strongly it's come back, and I think the momentum that I'm seeing from companies that are returning, from companies that want to grow, from the people that are living here, to the recovery of restaurants, to the political environment, I think pivoting in a way that's more business friendly makes me more optimistic than I thought I would be right now. So assuming that optimism carries through to reality, I think we'll be looking back and saying we're in the roaring 20s, albeit with the caveat that I still think there's going to be an element of this widening inequality that we need to, as a community, be very engaged and focused on addressing.
Well, I have no doubt that you'll be an important part of helping address that with the administration, both on the city level and on the state level. And I think we're all happy to be associated with you and to help move this city forward. So
thank you, John, and thank you for all your leadership and friendship. Much appreciated, my friend.
Our pleasure. Max, I think we turn it back to you.
Thank you both. That was great. We'll be talking about our time together and monitoring it in the future. I have no doubt about it, Jonathan. So for our next panel, hang on one second. I'm turning things over to Kathy Cunningham, the Deputy Editor and Finance Editor of Commercial Observer, for the panel Driving Value in Real Estate by Making Buildings Smarter. And Kathy is joined by Michael Turner, the president of Oxford, and Karen Quintana, the Vice President of Digital Product for International Well Building Institute. I leave things in your hands, Kathy.
Thank you, Max. Hi, Michael. Hi, Karen. How are you today?
Good. Hi, Kathy. Hi, Michael.
Well, Scott Reckler's a pretty tough act to follow, but we'll do what we can. It's great to see you both today. So I think a lot of what we discussed in the past discussion is, that COVID's brought about really significant changes in our industry, and we'll be looking at properties and the tenant experience. So as a kind of high-level kickoff point, how big of an accelerant do you think COVID was in terms of reshaping the way that we as an industry are thinking about sustainability, health, and wellness? Karen, do you want to kick us off?
Definitely. So I think COVID definitely raised the level of concern and awareness about both like fundamental building performance, health and safety, but also the way that real estate plays a role in our communities and the social environment of the people within it, the community, how, the tenants and landlords engage with each other. So definitely a lot of that. I think in the beginning, we saw a lot of rush with building automation systems or all the different platforms to incorporate health and wellness and health and safety into their offering. So you saw everything from, contact tracing and temperature scans at the door and things like that, all the way through advanced air disinfection, through UV strategies. So like the whole gamut of tech solutions to the COVID problem. But at IWBI, I think one of the things that we were a bit of voice of reason, where it's the basics, it's air quality, making sure that, you're increasing the levels of filtration, knowing how to do things, that you're limiting recirculation where possible, maybe adjusting humidity levels if appropriate. And so I think it was elevating the role of facilities. And one of the things that real estate was looking for, owners wanted to say, like, we're doing the right things, how do we tell our tenants? And so tools like ours with the Well Building Standard, Well certification, or even the Well Health Safety rating that we launched as a result are tools that, they've been using to communicate back to tenants and occupants, hey, we're doing all the right things, and instilling confidence to safely re-enter. So a lot of really interesting shifts with COVID as the accelerator, as you said.
Absolutely, because I guess a lot of things tenants can't see, right? They're told that their buildings are doing X, Y, and Z to improve things, but they can't necessarily see or touch the things that are actually happening. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And Michael, how about you? What's your approach to sustainability at Oxford before and also wellness before the COVID? And now, what does it look like today?
Well, thanks for having me and thanks for asking. I think Karen said a lot of really key points. For Oxford, this is a journey that has been going on many years. Our earliest introductions to technology were, quite frankly, around energy management, where we said we can use technology to save costs, to reduce carbon emissions. You can measure those outcomes using technology, and that was a journey that started for us about a decade ago.
Oh, wow.
You said that, or you asked the question, has COVID accelerated technology? I think the answer is obvious to all of us. Yes.
Yeah.
Walk around New York City and look at how many more Amazon deliveries that you see. Karen talked about some of the tools that people have had to stand up to access buildings, to monitor who's coming in and out. All of that was technology enabled. And even from a corporate standpoint, not a facilities standpoint, I can share with you as an example, as a global business, early on in the pandemic, one of the greatest challenges for us were the new rules, edicts, regulations, decrees that were being made by city, state, and federal governments around the world. And we didn't even have an ability to keep track of them. What is this new thing? Will it hurt us or will it help us? How do we operationalize it? And we had to devise in the trenches tools with technology to be able to monitor that whole set of activities. So I think Scott used the term phygital. My friend Lisa Picard often uses the term phygital, and that would be a concept that we are very much supportive of as the direction of travel for the industry.
Absolutely. And Michael, as a global organization, how did you take cues from other markets as COVID was kind of, I guess, developing different parts of the world? Like, did you take cues from, Asia or different places?
Well, as the walls were closing in, if we can all recall how we felt 10 months ago, they were coming in for us fastest in New York. We don't operate in China.
Right.
After we figured out how to close, I quickly turned to our chief operations officer and I said, we're going to have to figure out how to reopen. I know it feels like we've just closed, but we're going to have to figure out how to reopen. And we put a task force together who did that. And they looked early on to what was happening in Asia Pacific. How had China, Japan, Korea managed either through this pandemic or other prior ones? And the big service providers, as well as the entire industry, really collaborated on creating and sharing best practices. So yeah, we definitely look to other parts of the world.
That makes sense. You can only imagine the task at hand in terms of the rollout of making those changes across your portfolio. So yeah, big task. And now, Karen, part of your job at IWBI is supporting the industry as they pursue WELL certification for their properties. So how much of an increase did you see during the pandemic in terms of commercial real estate owners saying, okay, we've got to get this quick. We've got to get this in order pretty quick.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so we also, we have a big team in Asia. We have a big market in Asia. So we did have a little bit of insight in how they reacted and sort of when we established a task force of public health experts, it was a really robust task force to actually look at our standard and make sure that we were covering all of our bases. And luckily it stood the test. So we were able to launch the WELL Health Safety Rating. It's a subset of features within it as a more targeted path to really show operations, that you can do operational things. And so it was a nice starting path. So you had a lot of hospitality, a lot of retail, JP Morgan doing all of their retail branches, for example. Sporting venues were a big, you had Yankee Stadium, Empire State Building, all these who were able to really focus in on those core strategies that they could do, move quickly through our program. Whereas WELL certification is a bigger endeavor. There's much more, it's a higher gold standard of achievement. But the health safety rating was a nice way to quickly respond to what the market was looking for and get them started. So now a lot of them, one of the biggest, shifts that we're seeing is towards enrolling whole portfolios to applying WELL and the WELL standard at scale is much more efficient to do it. Thinking about aligning your, your reporting and all of that is definitely a big driver for us. At the same time, you have the The Hill is asking for more accountability on ESG. Consumers are asking for more accountability, and health, and like, what are you doing to impact my health and well-being, or support that is a big question that real estate is being asked, but also tenants are being asked to be accountable for that. And that's why we're seeing well, and the pursuit of well at scale being a core strategy, a core ESG strategy, and a key part of the reporting cycle each year.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, I think Scott mentioned this also, but, we as an industry have to make changes very quickly. And Scott was saying that, at any point we might have to change again if God forbid this Delta variant goes a certain way, or we have to go into panic mode again. But Michael, how are you preparing for any future potential COVID scares that we have, or any changes that you have to make very quickly to your portfolio?
I almost regret that question. Psychologically, I am so ready, like so many of us, to move forward. So I've actually been trying to encourage all of us as citizens, and this isn't to dismiss anything, but at some point we're going to have to move through a pandemic to an endemic. And that comes with it resiliency, an ability to manage the risk surface that's out there such that it's part of your life, as opposed to it controls all aspects of your life. So I don't think that we'd have a new playbook for a pandemic. We had pandemic preparedness plans before we went into this. I just never knew what it looked like. I didn't know how we would stand them up, but it turns out that we know how to do that. Honestly, if we had an issue, we would basically go back to the muscles that we've just developed in the last 10 months. And my focus for my teams, for the industry, for all of us, is to be smart and thoughtful and figure out how we continue to move forward, as opposed to go back into some form of lockdown again.
Yeah,
definitely. I think one of the trends that I'm seeing is portfolios that had co-working as part of theirs are able to respond to the increase in work from near, or the trend. So you have more of your city center headquarters, that you're working with your tenants, but being able to offer them more of an access pass that they can pass on and manage collectively for their employees to access other spaces. Like as this moves, risk levels change, and so maybe sometimes you want to have access to a place that's not your home, but you don't want to go to a more crowded city center. So I think those types of portfolios that already had a more flexible co-working style business model are actually able to take advantage of shifts in that kind of thing, and manage it more centrally with their technology.
Absolutely. And now, as we sort of, I guess we're really in the process of reopening right now. And I think, for the most part, a lot of companies are going to be fully back in the office by Labor Day, fingers crossed. But what are you hearing in terms of the tenant experience and what tenants are requiring of their landlords today?
Maybe I just offer a perspective around the tenant experience itself. And we've got to move, and we are moving as an industry from don't think about the four walls and the roof that you provide as shelter. Like, in its most basic form, we solved that problem 12,000 years ago when we started moving into caves, and we improved it into other forms of accommodation. For an office occupant, which is, I think, what you're getting at, Kathy, it's about the employee experience. And leaders, CEOs of businesses are having to ask themselves, what is the purpose of the office? The purpose of the office is not to provide shelter. It's not even to provide a desktop anymore. It's to provide some form of employee experience that helps your brand, that helps your engagement, that helps build your team, that helps propel your business forward. And I think for the next couple of months, we're going to continue to go through assisting occupants as they reintroduce their workforce with some tools and education around protocols. And the conversations are going to move over the next quarters and years to how do I deliver on the employee experience? Because we've all seen that if we want to, we can work from our homes, or we can work from wherever it is you've imagined in the world. So what's the purpose of the office, and how do we as owners help our customers deliver on that employee experience, which I think is going to be the heart of how we all roll out over the next several years.
Absolutely. And Michael, with that in mind, are you at Oxford Properties, are you fully back in the office, or are you doing a hybrid model going forward? Or what is your general take on what the future of office should look like for your own company as a business leader?
Sure. So at this specific point in time, it varies, and it varies in accordance with what are the local protocols in Berlin. They're quite different than in Boston, for example. So we always follow what is the guidance from local health authorities.
Right.
Culturally, there are differences with respect to people's risk tolerances, but in general, where are we going? Well, we actually believe that the office serves a purpose. It's where people learn to collaborate. It's where mentorship happens. It's where informal learning and ideas are exchanged. And we think people do their best work in the office. So that's going to be our primary place of work. Before the pandemic, Kathy, we had what's called a common sense approach. So if you're in leasing and you're always hanging out in the office, you're probably making me nervous. If you're in investments, you probably live on an airplane and you fly around the country, or you fly into different regions around the world. If you're in construction, you're likely at a construction site. And if your needs of your family are such that you've got to go pick up your kid at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday because you want to, then you're just going to do that, because I know people work late, they work weekends, etc. So that is to say, we had a common sense approach before. We're going to have a common sense approach afterwards. We believe the best work that we do and how we come together and build as a team is in person.
Right, absolutely. Karen, anything to add there?
I think tenants are demanding a little more transparency about how the building's performing. So when a lot of the technology was responding and incorporating health and wellness metrics, a lot of them are including occupant engagement. So it's wall boards that are, providing real-time measurements of air quality, or if they're tracking density with their tools, they're kind of letting you know as a tenant. So I do think that those are in a lot of ways starting to be like must-haves and not the nice-to-haves. Maybe pre-pandemic they were a little nicer to have. From our perspective, it's always been you need to design a building with occupants in mind, but the performance matters, and it's not just enough to intend to have a healthy space. There are protocols and maintenance things. There are policies and choices about who do you lease in your restaurant space. You're creating a food environment for the people within that space. The amenities that you choose to invest in and offer on site. Are you supportive of working mothers or not? There's a bigger role that landlords play in the health of the people who work in that building than they maybe thought before. And so to Michael's point, I do think that the relationships between landlords and their tenants has really evolved a lot, and health is a key strategy because it's about performance. There was a recent MIT Real Estate Labs study that looked at WELL, and they're seeing anywhere from a 4.4 to 7.7% rent increase for WELL spaces compared to their non-enrolled or non-certified peers. So I do think that you're starting to see much more awareness, and one of our demographics that is increasing is the Fortune 500 are really coming to us to as a core part of their the S in their ESG. They're tracking human capital metrics much more wholly now, and so they're looking for landlords who have that competency as well.
Interesting. And how overdue is this, Karen? Do you think this is something that had been, really overdue for some time before the pandemic hit? Is it kind of like a sigh of relief now that landlords are finally getting on board with this? Or
yeah, I mean, they've always kind of been leaders of things like LEED and energy efficiency and communicating to tenants, hey, we're making these investments and they're beneficial to you. I think WELL, because it's about human health more exclusively, it resonates in a way that energy efficiency doesn't maybe always do as profoundly. But yeah, I think it's been a nice tool to have that same benchmark, that same language that can be spoken for the tenants and the landlords. I do think at a minimum, you need to be tracking, continuous air quality, and a lot of organizations do. But one of the things we're trying to, we're partnering with Honeywell, with Trane, where we've recently announced that we're intending to have a well performance rating, making it much more continuous monitoring, working with these partners so that you can actually start to be recognized for high performance buildings more explicitly. But there's not a lot, there's not enough quality about how to measure acoustics or lighting levels or water quality in real time. So we're really working with the industry to make sure that it's easy for real estate owners to kind of understand what, baseline performance that they're offering to tenants. But I think all of it is really wrapped up in a really robust tenant engagement strategy that actually, like, these types of metrics and being able to tell that story back is the key driver there.
Absolutely. And is the ongoing monitoring, is that an annual process, or is it every 6 months, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think the best practice would be a continuous monitoring, throughout your system that kind of lets you know and is more predictive over time, to sort of recognize seasonality or different changes. I think that's sort of an ideal. With WELL, we test once every 3 years for certification, and the rating will be an annual, kind of like give us sort of the summary of your progress annually.
Right, absolutely. And I think another big change over the past 18 months or so has been really our industry's embracing of technology. So Mike, one thing I want to ask, I think Oxford is really at the forefront of a lot of this. So how has your smart building technology approach evolved over the past 18 months? And what's keeping you busiest today with that?
Thanks for the question. And some of it was discussed by Scott.
Yeah.
And there's an enormous amount of foundation building and capability building that the industry has to go through. And I mean that both as those who run buildings, as well as the service providers who we partner with. We, Kathy, as you may know, the person far more qualified to have this conversation for Oxford would be Dean Hopkins, our COO, than me. And Dean was hired, he's a technologist, but he has enormous insights into operations, because he's run data centers before. He's run large distributed businesses and taken them from analog to digital. And we had the perspective that the operations technology and information technology were going to merge, and software eats hardware. So the winner was going to be the IT. And rather than a CIO or a CTO and a COO, we just said, we're putting all of that under one roof. That decision is unlocking a whole new set of insights and capabilities for us to build the foundations that we're talking about. And we think that the world will go phygital. But we also think it goes through, and you and I have discussed this before, in the restaurant analogy, it goes through the kitchen. So we have to understand, what do we do from an operations standpoint? How do we run these buildings in the cloud? Where are our people? Where are the service calls coming from? Where are the pain points? Before we can enable them with meaningful technological change to have a step change in the occupant experience. So all of us have the ability to provide an app right now, and we're rolling out certain apps across our portfolio that will improve the occupant experience. But once we have figured out how to digitize the kitchen and the operations, that's where the building will become a meaningful extension of the service suite and the overall individual personal experience. And that's where we'll be able to have a step change in what is the experience of digital, if we call it. At this point, I think it's been too nascent. And we've had a lot of really innovative ideas from the Proptech universe that are what I would describe as a feature. We have to think of an end-to-end solution and an ecosystem. And for us, we've just made the decision that the journey starts in the kitchen, and that's really basics. That's basics like building virtualization, cybersecurity. This is a huge threat for our industry, and my guess is 49 out of 50 people listening right now probably don't have a meaningful cybersecurity plan at their assets. So we're going foundational, crawl, walk, run, and we're able to do things now, Kathy, we couldn't have done a year ago. And I think in 2 years' time, we'll have that step change that we're talking about.
Fantastic. Now, Michael, can you talk a little bit about digital twins and the benefits, and also any cautionary tales around building a digital twin? It sounds like a good band name, by the way, but Any thoughts on digital twins for us?
Yeah, I think that it's part of the future. I'm not exactly sure how it's articulated yet. If you look at manufacturing, all advanced manufacturing uses some form of twin technology. I'm not sure that facilities should be any different. What is the, you talked about some of the challenges. Some of the challenges are these systems are legacy systems. They were all designed by the original equipment manufacturers who controlled the hardware and the software, and they didn't want people to be able to talk to each other. So we've got to crack that code, and we're cracking that code. But the idea that you'll be able to manage your assets digitally, or what we say is be able to manage any asset anywhere in the world, from anywhere in the world. Digital twins are one of the vessels through which we'll be able to do that and enable that. And at this point, we've been trying to spend a lot of our time on what's the value proposition, as well as how do we do this at scale, cost effectively, and time effectively. And a lot of improvements have been made in the last year, and there are still opportunities for improvement before this stuff goes ubiquitous. It's getting closer.
Yeah, absolutely. And the value proposition questions are really interesting when I feel like, you know, obviously we're an industry that's trying to improve and be better, but I think the value proposition always comes into the fold, right? When you're just discussing any kind of changes to properties or portfolios. Karen, anything to add to that? You're nodding your head.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so excited about the, you know, digitization of buildings. I think that we, we're founded on a process of validation, you know, and right now it's also a pretty archaic, you know, it takes a long time to track down all this information. So we're keeping a close eye on on that trend, and think that it's definitely, you know, long-term value for that, you know, for that building. It's better to have all of that information tracked, and we'll try to leverage it. You know, we want to try to automate as much of this process over time as we can, but it's like, in the way that when you buy a car, you've got the Carfax, and it's really nice to see what investments were made, what maintenance was done when. I do think, you know, people are going to be asking more and more for that type of information, and so I think it's a nice trend overall.
Absolutely. And Karen, today, are you having to ever convince any owners that a well certification makes sense, or that it's important, or is it now just
always? Yes, I think you know, in other you know, Wired Score or LEED, I think these are optional leadership marks that really help to communicate and tell a story, and so we definitely have always had, you know, it's always been a part of it. I think one of the things that has changed for us since we launched in 2014 is, you know, the approach at scale, and the idea that health is, you know, it's not something you achieve. You know, you're just having like a card in your pocket to a gym isn't the same thing as going to the gym. And so I think shifting the paradigm a little bit from this, like, it's this plaque you put on your wall once, you know, it's like we were the ones to say, no, you have to recertify every 3 years. And people were like, what? You know, that's crazy when we launched. And so continuing to push that, it is, you know, you want to be able to establish a baseline for how healthy is your building, what types of things are you offering compared to a global standard, and be able to benchmark your buildings, you know, kind of across your portfolio, and then compare that to your peers. So I think that shift towards more of an organizational approach from just a location by location approach, and thinking about it as a journey that, you know, you don't, we can give you milestones and recognition along the way, but that overall, you know, that it's going to take some time for most organizations to deploy investments and to make certain procedural changes over time. And so I think that is important for us.
Absolutely. And I guess it's always evolving also, right? As guidance changes, as whatever else pops up, definitely makes sense. And now we're almost out of time here, but I'm curious to know from both of you, actually, what do you think is the biggest headwind to us becoming a more tech savvy and sustainability focused industry?
Well, I would take a stab at that from our own experience.
Sure.
One is just capability. So we have built a company and gone along a journey where these tools were not the foundation. And so we have to do two things. We have to go through a huge change management process and retraining people, getting them to think differently, getting them to operate what they do differently, as well as bringing capabilities and skills that we don't have. So we're on that journey, Kathy. We had a conversation this morning about just how long change management takes and how it is a journey to build something that doesn't exist. So that's our biggest challenge. The other one is just the Proptech industry, which is bringing some amazing solutions. It will go through some consolidation. That will be helpful to us because we manage 5,000 vendors at Oxford. We cannot manage 25,000 vendors. We don't want to. We'd rather manage 500 vendors than 5,000 vendors. And so as those technologies figure out that, they're part of something and they're doing something that's really special, but if they were part of an end-to-end solution or an ecosystem, they'd be easier for us to adopt and scale across, our businesses, which are also complicated.
Right, absolutely. Karen, any last words there?
Yeah, I think ESG and disclosure is going to continue to increase, pressure around that. So, using GRES, reporting to GRES, using tools like Well, to be more accountable. I do think that there is a really kind of separate, kind of to Michael's point on the building day, gathering this data, your environmental performance, your social impact, your kind of internal governance processes. Like, I think those are all, again, in very separate systems. And so we're going to see kind of more of a shift towards like unifying strategies, ecosystem approaches to reporting for ESG.
Well, lots to kind of think about and look forward to in the future, hopefully. But certainly, it's lovely to see some of the changes that have been made already, and it seems to be our industry as a whole is very focused on being better. So, I want to thank you both so much for your time today. It was an absolute pleasure, as always, and hopefully I'll speak with you again soon. Now, with that, I'm going to hand back over to Max Gross, I believe.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Karen. A great conversation there. And for our next panel, I'm going to be turning things over to our finance reporter, Andrew Cohn, for the dawn of data. And I will let Andrew introduce the panel.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Max. And, thank you for joining us today. I'm, as Max said, I'm Andrew Cohen, a finance reporter at Commercial Observer, and I'll be moderating this next panel, The Dawn of Data, and how analytics is aiding the real estate industry with investment decisions. I want to welcome our panelists, Stefan Martinovich, Vice President of Data Partnerships at Placer.ai, Ari Rastiger, Founder and CEO of Rastiger Property Company, and David Vincent, Investment Product Specialist at Cadre. So thank you all for joining us. Let's jump right in since time is short. Let's begin with you, Stefan. In general, how would you say COVID has impacted the use of data in various sectors of commercial real estate?
Thanks, Andrew. It's good to be with you guys. And yeah, I mean, it's changed it tremendously in a number of pretty profound ways. I mean, people are using data and, location intelligence in, more settings than they ever have across so many different industries. And, what I see is that, the need for data is getting kind of more real time. How can you perform, competitive intelligence and other sorts of market analysis with, fresher, more latent, lower latency data. And then, that's expanding across a broader number of categories. So, what we do at Placer.ai is we aggregate mobile phone data, use that to, understand patterns of human mobility, in between different places over time. So kind of the Google Mobility Index on steroids. And, what we're seeing is, tremendous and high volume population moves and changes in consumer buying patterns that we've never seen, or has been particularly widely seen throughout the world at any period. And by being able to track that using our technology, we're seeing tremendous growth in a time where the basket sizes and the visit types and the dwell times of customers are just changing radically, and in very large numbers. So by kind of adopting products like ours, products like better asset management and investment management tools, it's allowed people to kind of get a window into the world from their desktop by necessity, and has been a way to be able to really continue on throughout the entire asset life cycle, from acquisition through asset management, using a full complement of data that has vaulted things 5 years forward from where we were pre-pandemic.
And to piggyback off of that a little bit, how would you say data is being used to track the economic recovery from really the low points of COVID last year?
Yeah, I mean, we even just as a recent example, Placer put out a free tool that highly recommend you guys go check out. It's called the Placer COVID Recovery Tracker, and basically what it allows us to do is to be able to look at any zip code, any business improvement district, state, county in the United States, and to track foot traffic recovery across a wide range of different retail categories. So, we can understand that in, some areas maybe that are in the periphery of major cities, that like are seeing, spikes in traffic by people, leaving more dense environments. We're able to, understand that and how that's evolving over time. Also, the use of second home ownership and, even kind of less permanent migration patterns that are enabled by remote work are all things that we're able to kind of bring into the fold, to track how people are engaging with the new economy, and where there's a loss in brick and mortar, in certain geographies, that's, supplanted by, often e-commerce and online traffic. So we're able to capture some of those nuances as well.
Great. And now let's bring you in, Ari. And I should also point out that and all the panelists, feel free to jump in at any point, if there's anything you want to chime in on. But so Ari, you certainly have a unique perspective on this as a 39-year-old who certainly understands technology, as a millennial, while also being a real estate purist at heart. Your firm is ahead of the curve on this data trend, using AI technology. Explain how this has aided your business.
I mean, at the end of the day, your investment decisions are only as good as the data you have. Okay. And so the cleaner your data is, the closer it is to real time, as Stephan was mentioning before, better those decisions can actually be. So the rest of the world in some regard has caught up with this idea of understanding data in a pretty granular format, but real estate, for whatever reason, has remained relatively archaic. So there's an opportunity for disruption in a pretty major way, kind of at the business level, but at the consumer level, you can start to really understand, the habits of your consumers, of your tenants. Certainly, if you look at our multifamily platform, understanding our tenants' needs when they're leaving, what times they're arriving back at the apartment complexes, and understanding their needs helps us, better serve them. On the investment side, understanding the data, the foot traffic, all the things that that Placer does as well, helps you really understand whether or not you're making an emotional decision or whether or not you're making a decision, based in math that is actually, that is genuine to the times today, because these things are changing so rapidly that you really need data almost in real time to make those type of decisions, because the historical data that we have, I don't want to say is obsolete, but has changed so dramatically that you can't solely rely on that. You have to make assumptions based upon forward-thinking economics. Certainly taking into consideration the past, obviously, but understanding what's happening right now. And the only way to do that is through the use of technology. And now it's become a necessity more than kind of add-on. So when we were using technology 3, 4, 5 years ago, people looked at us with these, really funny faces. But now it's become, almost mandatory to compete in this environment.
Yeah, and how has COVID changed your approach to the technology and how you utilize it?
I mean, COVID, is basically, so if we, take out the COVID and not make it sensational as it is, and look at it as just a stress tester, right? So something that could happen that would be, one of your assumptions of the stress test that would impact, your vacancy, impact lease up. If you look at it from that vantage point, you'll see that the quicker that you can understand the data in real time, the better that you can pivot to make those decisions, right? So COVID, because it impacted everything globally, and we're watching it, start to kind of erupt again, has made it almost a necessity to approach, because you can no longer wait an extra month, 2 months, 3 months to understand what happened in the trailing 90. You need to be looking, 30 days in the future to make those type of decisions. It's not just a desire to, right, anymore. Now it's almost mandatory.
And now let's go to David. You have said that technology can help make commercial real estate more accessible and transparent and less expensive than ever before. Explain more on how this is the case.
Sure. Well, I think there's a number of different ways that technology can change the landscape for real estate investing. And so at Cadre, the way that we really think about it is that technology allows us to be faster and smarter in everything we do, right? So we break up the way that we think about technology in the supply and the demand functions. And so when you think about supply, that's selecting, acquiring, and managing properties. And I think that touches on some of the areas that you hear a lot about in Proptech and a lot of the new technologies that some innovative companies are coming out with today. But we also think about it on the demand side, which is developing a superior end-to-end investment client experience, right? So, for us, easily accessible, you can come to our website, you can look at all the properties we have. It's making it more transparent, where you have much more information about those properties that we're offering out either through direct syndication on a deal-by-deal basis, or through the fund that we offer, or even separate accounts. So there's a number of different ways that we approach that. But as Ari said, I think a really important point is when you're looking at real estate investing, your investment is only going to be as good as your data, right? And I think that we take that idea a little bit farther. As a real estate investment firm, if you're using the same data as everybody else, it's really hard to have a differentiated view, right? And so that's, I think, where some of our edge comes from, is that we're using a lot of data. We have a brilliant data science team developing proprietary data, tools, analytics. We've created our own property index where we're looking at the price of real estate across 50 different metro markets in the US. And we're even using machine learning to project into the future. Hopefully, we can get pretty good with that. But on the margins, if we can be a little bit better in understanding what the growth of a given city is going to be, or what that market might look like, it helps us have greater conviction when we're looking at properties and when we're bidding on a property, how fast we want to move. And those are the types of things that, as an investor, can really help you get a property before other people, or hopefully get into a city a few months, even 6-month advantage or a 12-month advantage before the headlines take off, talking about the growth of a city can really be a huge head start when you're looking at new areas. And so at Cadre, having a national view, we can invest across the US, being able to invest in different asset classes and sectors within real estate, whether it's multifamily, office, or industrial. I think you need to have that flexibility, but you need to have the data that can supplement your on-the-ground investment experience through your acquisitions team to really drive that narrow focus and give you, hopefully, what I think is an attractive edge.
And explain how you integrate AI and machine learning tools into your investment process.
Sure. Well, again, I think, it starts with having the data. So by collecting our own data from primary sources, I mean, we're collecting, millions of data points from, tens of thousands of different sources all over the country, pulling it in. It gives us a lot more flexibility, right? So when we're looking at a given metro area or a city, and we're able to break down, not just looking at existing sales for properties, but we're looking at other deals that we've looked at and maybe passed on. We have information from deals that we own in a given city as well. We're able to aggregate all of this information into a very, I think, a high quality view of where pricing is at any of these markets that we're tracking across any different asset class. But using that data in real time, we're able to now use very advanced machine learning techniques that we've been refining over the past number of years to project. We're only looking like 2 to 3 years into the future. And if you look at the models, right, like you're able to track the actual price over time. And at any given point in time, you have all these different lines where it's projecting out. And over time, those lines, you're getting hopefully a narrower variance as you're re-optimizing those models. So every quarter, we're loading in all of this new data into that machine learning program, and it's able to get incrementally better and better. And again, if we're looking at, say, a place like Phoenix, everyone thinks that Phoenix is going to grow at 4%. Maybe we think it's going to grow at 4.5% or 4.25%. It doesn't sound like a lot, but on the margins, those variant views can really help drive those decision-making process. It can increase your conviction, or it could give you pause and say, hey, wait a second, everyone's pricing in a higher growth than what we think you're really going to get. These numbers don't add up for us anymore. And maybe we pass on some deals that otherwise we might regret down the road.
Let's go back to you, Stefan, and then everyone else can chime in as well on this next question, which is, what would you say is the most underutilized data set in commercial real estate?
I think that location analytics is a category more broadly. I think there's been a huge wave of data that's come out from all different sides, everywhere from hardware to, demographics and psychographic segmentation. Over the last, really 10 years, I've seen a huge acceleration. But the tools to manipulate and extract insights from that data have historically tended to be harder to use. They required specialized skills and, hiring for specific technical talents. And, that's been challenging for the real estate industry. And so, a lot of those capabilities kind of ended up, in other industries, like, government and design, architecture, engineering, that sort of thing. And I think that, I've seen kind of an uptake in, the adoption of these location technologies more recently, but it's been a historically underinvested category. So, for people who are, kind of just getting started out and kind of adopting data, I've seen them kind of, be able to take some easier to use location analytics tools, whether it be for, retail site selection or, anything kind of along those lines that there's, in our case, movement of people, but, also movement of dollars, and kind of just being able to, understand, how demographic change is happening and where it's happening and when it's happening. That requires, I think that Google Maps is probably the most widely used tool in commercial real estate, but there's not a Google Maps for commercial real estate, right? So, it's kind of gone on in the shadows, kind of figuring out ways to work around some of the technical and the data limitations to be able to bring, these sorts of interactive maps and those kinds of experiences to light. And I think that that's a trend that's going to continue.
David or Ari, any other underutilized aspects you think that have not been used as much in data in commercial real estate that perhaps there should be more of?
Well, I'd say, taking a step back, what's interesting about real estate, and Ari touched on this earlier, right, is how slow the real estate industry has been to adopt this level of data analysis, analytics, and forecasting. And I think it's because the data, though it exists, is so disparate, right? It's in municipal data systems, and it's over here and over there. And it's a skill set that real estate investment firms or management firms and property firms haven't historically had. And so, building it is a very slow process. And, I think that there are a lot of areas that are underutilized, largely because the data is not readily available. It's not good, or if it's something that everyone's using, right? But, I think one area, as Stefan just mentioned, looking at the movement of people, right? Demographic trends. And, it's easy to look at census data. It's easy to see the headlines and where you have job growth. I think part of the way that we look at a city, when we decide we have, what we call the Cadre 15, our 15 highest growth markets, right? It's not just what's growing today. You also want to look at the municipal data and are they building in the infrastructure, whether it's roads, airports, hospitals, education, things like that that are a little bit more qualitative, but you can still quantify. And when you see that level of commitment, it allows for, I think, much more durable, sustainable, long-term growth. And let's face it, with real estate, you're making long-term investments. So, the growth over the next year to 3 years is less important than whether or not those growth trends can continue over the next 5 to 10 or even longer, right?
Yeah, and Ari, let's go back to you. You kind of touched on a little bit about the company view of how you've been able to benefit from using more data. But let's look at the property view as well. You've mentioned that you collect data points across even breaking it down between electrical, plumbing, appliances. You relying on this AI capabilities. How is this just explain a bit of how this is giving you maybe an edge on the property side of the business?
Sure. I mean, I think the short answer is to the original question of what is underutilized in the data set is, the use of data, in itself, just the data alone. So if you're really using data, even though a lot of it is disparate, as was mentioned, which makes a lot of sense, you're already differentiating yourself. So for us, as you mentioned, like we track, if you turn on a microwave in your unit, in your multifamily unit, I keep going back to multifamily because it's easier to discuss. If you turn on a microwave, that you turned on a microwave, know exactly how many watts you're using. So understanding those behavioral patterns over time lead to some pretty valuable insights. So what was mentioned earlier that I think is really probably the most beneficial is coming up with your own proprietary analysis. I mean, so the data is the data, but what you're extrapolating from it and how you're utilizing it, that's where the so-called secret sauce comes in, right? So I think that's the thing that we really do as companies is understand what we're looking for and come up with our own proprietary set, because if everybody's looking at the same data, drawing the same conclusions, the value of it is basically nil. So what we've done is is essentially that collected the data that we felt to be relevant, even when we didn't really understand it. And honestly, a lot of the data we've collected, we still don't really understand, but we're still collecting it and figuring out, having a thesis around what the data means, going back and checking it, right? Going back to the basics. But from the leasing side and the property management side, having that data from inside, from the unit itself, from the actual consumer behavior, from the appliance usages, coming and going from the property, you could really make some pretty, stark assumptions about a given corridor, an area, growth potential, demand needs, how many people are coming, walking the property from a leasing standpoint versus leases signed. You could start really, taking things to be almost elementary data points, but adding real-time data to those elementary assumptions lead to pretty profound conclusions we found.
All right, well, we're heading, kind of hitting the home stretch of the panel here. So, well, first off, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A queue, and I'll try to get to them. But I want to open this one to really anybody who wants to give their thoughts. What is the best way to have an edge in this new data trend, given the current commercial real estate climate?
Well, I'd love to touch on, tying into that question on the comments that we just heard. And, I think it is that, the data is the data and it's what you do with it. But we still have this challenge of collecting data in some cases, right? And it's that real-time data that's so valuable. So, for example, we're a value-add investor. Often, like, we do a lot of multifamily deals. And so often we're buying, it could be an older property, an older vintage deal where we're doing a renovation, right? So getting the data as we're going through the renovation process, say there's 200-300 units and we're going to go through and renovate all of them, hoping that we'll get maybe a 20% increase in rents when we come through, or 20% increase or return on cost, right, through the rental increase. If you're getting a chunk of data that's static every 3 to 6 months from the property manager, that's not very helpful. Or you're getting something that's 30 days later after a month ends or whatever, it doesn't really help you in real time make crucial decisions to have that edge to be better at what you're doing. And so one of the things that we've done that I think is kind of novel, right, is all these different companies use their own property management software. So we've created our own internal proprietary software that can actually plug into each of these different third-party property management software packages and feed us real-time data. So when we're doing a renovation project, for example, what that information tells us is as we're completing renovations and then we're leasing out, we can see very quickly, are we hitting those numbers, both in how well we're leasing it up, as well as the actual rents that we're getting, which can inform us of, whoa, wait a second, we missed the market here. We're putting too much into these units. We need to scale back the renovation we're doing. Or do we lean in and go full steam ahead, get these renovations done quicker so that we can get back out to market and capture those rental increases? So having that data, it's not just, I think it's really interesting when you're looking at, when are people coming in and out of the building so you can optimize how you're managing. But also as you're doing that type of value add program, it can also give you, I think, tremendous insight.
Got it. I think we've probably got time for maybe one more question. So again, I'll open it to anybody. What are some new categories of data we can expect to see in the near future with commercial real estate?
Well, I can speak from personal experience that, mobility data and insights that are derived from mobility data, is kind of like, I think the big new entrant into the category. I think everyone's known to look at rents and vacancy and parcel records and square footage for a while. But now, like Placer, for instance, offers like a bunch of capabilities that, actually allow you to kind of understand these behavioral patterns and trends and how people are engaging with these locations over time. So, if there's more of an afternoon crowd that's developing rather than, a morning crowd, that can impact tenant mix. So, we're able to do that, kind of without, any hardware or ownership or confidential information of the property at all. So you can do it on your property, learn more about your customer than you might know otherwise. And you can do it on your neighbor and competitor's property. So, that, and all of the, really, I'll stress like all of the derivative stuff that comes off of the mobility data, which is something that, is an area that we're focused in, is, really exciting because it just opens up all sorts of, new insights around, migration trends and utilization, things like that.
Got it. David or Ari, any thoughts?
I agree. I think understanding the mobility is going to be mission critical. I don't think it's going to be it's almost not a choice understanding that. Like I said, we've started to this for many years at the asset level, how many cars are passing by the property, but looking at it on a more macro level and be able to dial in, it's going to tell you where the bodies are going to be. So I think that's I think that's spot on.
All right. Well, we're nearing the end here. Before we wrap up, any just final thoughts on this topic that anyone wants to offer?
I just say, the topic is spot on. I think that we are in the kind of the dawn of a new era in real estate. Whether it's property managers, whether it's people that are, the owners, investors. The data is rapidly growing in importance, and I think the value that we're going to continue to get from it in the industry is lower in cost. increasing access and, just creating a better overall, approach to owning, managing, sourcing, and, investing in real estate. And it's really exciting to be a part of this. So thank you so much, Andrew, for having us on today.
Yes, thank you everyone for a great discussion. So that's the end of our session. I want to thank once again all the panelists. I'd now like to welcome back Max Gross to lead our next session on real estate's disruptor generation with Richard Chera, co-founder and senior managing director, Crown Acquisitions, and Mitchell Moynihan, principal of the Moynihan Group.
Hello, I'm here today. My name is Max Gross, editor-in-chief of Commercial Observer. I'm here today with Richard Chera, partner at Crown, and Mitchell Moynihan, principal at the Moynihan Group. Richard, Mitchell, welcome today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Max.
So I wanted to speak to both of you as you guys your companies own a lot of real estate. You're from, you come from that background. Just broadly speaking, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what do landlords want from Proptech, broadly speaking. Richard, do you want to start?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Max. So what do we want from Proptech? So I think technology, like any other industry, real estate is really ripe for disruption. Technology has disrupted, dozens of other industries, and real estate, being the largest asset class in the world, is really on the verge of disruption, and technology is really going to help that. So what we're looking for ultimately is a better tenant experience. We want to listen to our tenants. We want to hear what they want to get out of us as landlords, and how we can do things better for them, more efficient, faster, cheaper, and ultimately, that's what we're looking for out of what technology will do for us.
Mm-hmm. Mitch?
I mean, I obviously agree with what Richard said. On the product and real estate side, it's our business is inherently very physical. That's what 99% of the value of real estate is, and it's ripe for this kind of enhancement and this kind of advancement, and that's what's obviously been going on. So from experience to the way we use, to the efficiency, to energy, to every aspect of real estate, technology is becoming more and more important to be applied to it. And I think that's what everyone is looking for across the board. I think also on the other side of the coin, though, additionally, in a business way, I think a lot of real estate owners and landlords are also looking at the investment side of technology as also, a hedge, or, the other side of the coin of our business, because they are somewhat very counterbalanced, and a lot of landlords feel like they should be on both sides, and you're seeing that a lot now. So I think those are the two kind of main themes of how real estate owners look at technology these days.
Mm-hmm. And specifically, would you say that there are certain aspects of Proptech that you find more attractive, that you are like more investing more in, looking more at?
For me?
Yeah.
So for our company, we started our venture platform in 2015. Mm-hmm. And, it has a name, we call it Currency M for Moynihan, obviously. And, basically for us, we're not scientists or data scientists, or I don't come from an engineering background. So the thing was for us was to have a simple approach, which was that if this is something we like, whatever this venture is, if it's software, if it's just a company of some kind, operating company, whatever the case may be, if it's something we like, do we see ourselves using it, or do we see our tenants using it? And that could be residential or commercial or hotel guests, whichever part of the industry that we are investors in. And if we see them using it, then we see, is this a good business? And if those two things check out, we proceed basically in like what we call like a positive feedback loop, right? Of investing and using and applying and so on and so forth, and keeping that growing. And that's what we've done. We have almost about 20 companies today. And, to answer your question more specifically, we tend to shy away, even though we've been involved in hardware type things, because it's a very, very specific, less kind of, I don't know, I guess less obvious route to go on, and things that are very practical, things that, like Richard said, are automatically increasing efficiency, and things that, are just very simple for day-to-day users. So we look at many different companies like that, and thankfully we've had a good experience so far.
So 2015 was the date for Moynihan that you guys established Currency M. When did you know, Richard? Like, what was the date for you guys? Like, when did you know that this was going to be important?
So I think technology and how it interacted with real estate really started around that time as well. Back in about 2014, 2015, we noticed, and specifically my late father noticed, that e-com was really going to affect what our core business was at the time, which was retail. And back then he had seen the migration of companies moving more towards an e-com platform, and the omni-channel platform started to get more heavily weighed into the e-commerce because of the cost structure was much more efficient than a brick and mortar at the time. So we divested of a lot of our suburban non-core real estate, retail real estate specifically at the time. So that's sort of how we saw technology adversely affecting certain sectors in real estate. And then from there, we started to build on the momentum, and it really started to culminate into a theory around how we want to invest in technology and how it affects real estate. So we really are highly focused, not necessarily on hardware or software, but around the company that really embodies ESG principles. So if we could find companies out there that have a Proptech angle that specifically embodies ESG principles, that's for us our main focus right now as a family and as a company.
What are some of those principles? Like, just ESG is kind of broad. Like, is there anything specific?
Sure, absolutely. Well, as you know, real estate is the largest polluter of any industry out there, and specifically, I think in the construction side of it, is very, very intense on the environment. So we're looking specifically at companies that either help to build or design or operate buildings much more efficiently from an environmental standpoint. And then on the social aspect and good governance, I think there's a lot of companies out there that are helping the underserved communities, specifically in urban areas, out there in very rural communities. So we're finding a lot of companies out there that are helping those types of communities.
Now, Richard, you mentioned obviously Crown's, core business in real estate, in retail. Retail, it seems, is one of these industries that seems like could really use some sort of great Proptech fix. I'm curious whether there's what are some of the, what are some of the things that have come across your desk for that?
So we've seen Proptech help retail real estate and retailers in general in a multifaceted. So one is the user experience, the general shopping and the brick and mortar omni-channel. Then also we've seen companies help out retailers on the back office side of it, in the financial side of it, the distribution, the logistics of it. I think logistics is going to be really heavily influenced by technology, whether it's on the industrial side or ultimately feeding the retailers. So there's multiple touch points there where technology is helping out retailers on the retail side of it.
Now, I want to get back to something that you mentioned, Richard, but ask you, Mitch, about this. What about some of the companies that you're invested in terms of construction and building things more efficiently? Has that been a focus of some of Currency M's work?
Construction is a tough one that we talk about a lot. you know, I don't know. This is a personal thing, but I've always been, and, you know, development is obviously a big part of what our company does. We're, you know, constantly and actively developing, you know, several buildings at a time. But I've always been kind of like fascinated by the fact that, you know, even in 2020 or 2021, I know this sounds like a gross exaggeration, but we're not building buildings that differently than we were like 100 years ago. I mean, we are obviously in many ways that, you know, there's so many ways I can argue with what I just said, but in a kind of simplify, you know, that's how I look at it, right? So buildings took 3 years in the mid 20th century to build big buildings. I mean, just like they do now. Of course, they're much more safe now. Of course, there's less waste and the materials are better and the technology is better. Yes, but I've always been kind of dumbfounded by that. So I know that construction is just a big one that's waiting to burst, but it's not something that I've said necessarily that I'm going to be behind, because it's such a big industry. It's such a complicated, you know, kind of sophisticated industry when it comes down to that level of construction. And we're involved, you know, with Onsite IQ, a company we spoke about earlier, which is a 3D construction progress mapping technology that we use, Boston Properties uses, Avalon Bay uses. So some of the best developers in the country use. But again, it's a whole sector, and we always like to identify themes. And if we can pick or find something or meet an entrepreneur that solves something within that theme, we like to get behind that. So construction is definitely one of the themes that Current Scene gets involved with, and it's something we'll probably do more over time.
Got it. Now, well, what you said, Mitch, is very interesting because, you know, you're right. You know, real estate is still brick and mortar, and there's this, like, you know, very, it's true. It's still about location, still about all these things, and yet, so much of Proptech is about, you know, innovation and looking for the next thing and trying to predict the future about these things. You guys are both from like long established real estate families. Can I ask you what that was like, how hard it was to get, you know, the families interested in Proptech and interested in, you know, being ahead of the curve on this?
Richard, do it.
So, was it difficult? I'll be honest with you. It really wasn't. It came from the top, like I mentioned, 7-8 years ago, and it was more like the younger generation needed to absorb what the older generation was trying to teach us. So no, it really wasn't all that challenging. If you didn't see it coming, it was pretty evident that that technology was going to disrupt it. I mean, if you could do so many things easily on your iPhone, then there's no reason why it should be a cumbersome process to you know, design, build, or operate real estate. It just made no sense whatsoever. So if you didn't see that coming, you really missed something like that. But I really think it's only the beginning, Max. I really do. I think there's a tremendous amount of really, really smart people out there. I've been floored by the talent that's out there that's really creatively thinking about real estate and how it should be working and going in the future.
Well, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, where do you think the next big thing is? Like, what should we be paying attention to?
I mean, listen, it's a very, very broad spectrum out there. I mean, there's industrial that's just becoming so much more efficient out there. There's ag tech. Farming is just insane. Urban farming is just going, you know, gangbusters out there. I think all sectors, like you mentioned earlier, I think retail is going to get really, really affected in a positive manner from this. Residential, I can't talk much about, but I could just tell you that I know that the smart home is becoming not a luxury anymore. It's going from all sectors, from you know, entry level all the way up to super luxury. So the smart homes and technology is being affected. And then on the overall, the safety, security, health, wellness, there's so many companies out there that are creating great software and hardware technologies to help real estate move into the 21st century.
Mitch, I was hoping that you could. So one of the things that I was very interested that you guys are working on is Built. Could you tell us a little bit about Built?
Sure. So like I mentioned, with Currency, almost 20 companies now, and we've been investors and partners and active partners in many of them. And kind of, the one that you can't have your favorites, and I really don't, but the one I'd say I'm most excited about because it's the newest and it's the one I've had the most involvement in is a company that we launched literally, I think, 2.5 weeks ago at this point, which I'm a founding partner in, which is called Built Rewards, BILT. And very simply, Built Rewards is the first rewards program that exists that earns renters, which is a $400 to $500 billion industry in America. And I don't need to tell this group or the viewers of this kind of webinar, how important renters are in the economy in this country. The first platform to earn rewards just for paying rent, right? Which never existed. And we're very excited about that because me and my co-founders and other partners just really, we've thought about how simply, you can go to Starbucks and get a cappuccino and get a bunch of stars or whatever their thing is called. You can go to JetBlue and, upgrade to extra legroom and get a bunch of JetBlue points, but you can spend $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month or whatever the case may be on rent, right? So, 40 grand a year or more in some cases and less in some cases, obviously. And besides your four walls, which are obviously very important, you're not really getting much else for that much money, right? And something's got to give. So we started Built and we've brought on, basically, I think the best in class owners as partners in the company as well. So, we have Blackstone as a partner, Avalon Bay as a partner, Equity Residential as a partner, Related as a partner, Starwood Capital as a partner, and several others. And of course, obviously the Moynihan Group and myself. And we are basically have taken this group of ownership. We've created an amazing group of partners, and we've launched and distributed the platform, or are in the midst of distributing platforms to all the residents. And just to finish it off, the platform is how I described it, but it also has one amazing kind of function, which is that it also comes in the form of a MasterCard. Right, which is one of the key parts about the program. As you guys know, rent is not typically paid on credit card for fees and all kinds of other reasons. It's about 3, 4, 5% of the transactions at best these days across New York City, and even though our program's nationwide. And with the Built MasterCard, it's a Diamond MasterCard. All the points you earn basically earn you all the luxury and leisure benefits of the highest levels of MasterCard. So just paying your rent can give you, round trip business class seats for, the year and points and so on and so forth. And I guess the biggest part at the end, which was where we actually started the concept, was that we actually got approval from the FHA for you to use your points toward the down payment of a house after your average of 7 years of renting is over and you do actually end up buying a house. So there's many kinds of those benefits and pillars of the concept, but those are basically the main ones. And we're very excited. And so far it's been great. And we are out there and we're taking names on a wait list if you're not part of that partner portfolio that I described. And we're very excited.
Mitch, I can't believe that. I just remember back when I was at the New York Post in like the 2005, 2006, writing about the first time an American Express card was used to pay rent, and a guy who was taking a trip to the Bahamas because of his. Right. It's such a great idea.
Someone had to pay 2-3% for that transaction, right? Which is probably why that guy didn't do it again, or his landlord or her landlord didn't do it again. And the magic here is that it's completely feeless when you pay your rent. And that's obviously was a big part of the structuring of the concept, and that's why we think it's going to be a great success.
I'm going to talk to my landlord about that. Ask him.
There's a solution for out of network properties right now if your partner hasn't signed, if your landlord hasn't signed up. So I'll send you the link.
Richard, I want to talk about Crown SPAC. So I know that you're confined a little bit, but what can you tell us about that?
So we conceived the idea a little over a year and a half ago, actually, in early 2020. And when COVID hit, things got a little bit slowed down and then picked back up, I'd say late summer, early fall of last year. We had a tremendous positive feedback from the focus that we were really trying to achieve. A couple of my co-sponsors on the SPAC itself really are span the globe. So we have partners in San Francisco, partners in London, partners in Germany, and we really believe what we've been talking about here for a while, which is how technology is going to disrupt the real estate industry, and it's extremely broad. In terms of where we're looking at, but ultimately we come back to a company that has an ESG focus, ideally a company with a good SaaS platform and a good idea that has scalability on it. So like I was saying earlier, I think it's a very early start for technology and what it's going to do to real estate. And I think many real estate owners are not only going to be forced to embrace it, I think they'll actually be happy to embrace technology as it comes through to real estate.
Mm-hmm. Now, I wanted to ask you both. Now, before we started on this call, Mitchell, you were mentioning that one of the companies that Current CM is invested in was developed in, I think you said one of the Cornell incubators. What do you think the role is for incubators in all of this? How helpful can they be in terms of developing this technology and bringing it, to market?
Honestly, I've never really thought about or been asked that question before, and I think about this stuff quite often. But I will tell you that what comes to my mind is, in my experience, there's just many ways that a entrepreneur, and we mostly focus on early stage, so I'll characterize them on really the founders or the principals of these companies. There are many ways that they get to where they get, right? I've seen so many different executions and so many different routes. So yes, I have met, or we have invested in a company that has come out of Cornell Tech or some kind of institutional education platform. But there have also just been people that have just pounded the pavement or made their way through or proved themselves in so many different ways. So honestly, Max, I mean, yeah, obviously being part of a institution like Cornell or NYU or whatever amazing university that you come out helps, but I don't think one might be necessarily better than other, right? Being with the right, being in the right circle, or basically taking a certain approach, or having a certain conviction, or whatever the case may be, has taken some of the founders and entrepreneurs that I know even further than a school has taken some, and vice versa. So it's hard for me to say, but I think at the end of the day, as long as the entrepreneur has it in them, that's the thing that matters more, not as much which incubator has reared them. But obviously incubators can be great because they provide support and financial support and resources, and sometimes you don't have any other way to have that. So it's an interesting question.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to also just ask you both, and let's start with Richard. So how do you think Proptech is being monetized, in terms of creating revenue streams for owners? Has that come to fruition yet, or has it? There's just been so much investment talked about, but has revenue started yet?
Revenue streams for owners, I think, is starting. I think in certain user experience applications for the landlords. I think that is starting. So in a couple of our suburban office buildings now, we're installing self-service similar to Amazon Go shops for quick grab and goes. So I think that that's creating some revenue streams there. I think some parking applications, some EV charging applications are creating revenue streams for landlords as well. So it's definitely starting out there. And then on the cost saving side, I think there's a lot of energy efficiency products that are out there that are saving landlords, day one as soon as those products are installed.
Now, I want to give you both a couple of minutes at the end to just, give us your final thoughts and some of the things that you wanted to say. But I did want to ask one last question of both of you. Is there a Proptech that you've seen that you just wish you did? Like, what's your favorite Proptech out there that you sort of just like, oh gosh, I wish I had gotten in on the ground floor on that? Mitch, do you have a favorite? Is there somebody that you admire from afar that is one of your favorites?
I hate to remind myself, and actually someone had this conversation with me last night, but, so I'm not going to mention names because I'm not going to cry over spilt milk, but, I will just say this, we started investing in 2015, right? And which I guess is now 6 years ago, but really I started the process probably 10 years ago, right? But 10 years ago I was 22, and also all my money that I ever saved up went into real estate at the time. And and I obviously came from a real estate family, and as you know, Max, and as you know, Richard, real estate people typically tend to not like to get out of real estate, right? It's just the kind of way they are. Real estate people are very real estate invested, which may change as we're just describing. So anyways, back then I did meet many companies that, I probably said this about companies that also didn't make it, but I did meet many companies. I said, wow, this is really something. This is really interesting. Like, how can this not work? But also I was in my last few days of college at the time, basically. And also I didn't really have the means. And, those companies now, and I can think about 4 of them, are multi-billion-dollar companies, right? And I definitely take it as a lesson learned. No excuses, obviously, but timing is important in life, obviously. And I learned, right? And I saw what made those companies who they are, and which ones I met that didn't go anywhere, and it actually helped me make those decisions when I was more ready, a few years later, 5 years later, in later on, after those. So there were companies, and I watched them, and I still hope they are successful, because at least I can pat my back and say, you wanted to do this one. So, you did something, you said something right here. But yeah, and that will always happen. And the most you can do is learn. And I definitely have learned, and I still do, obviously every day.
Richard, was there one that got away for you?
Quite honestly, no, I have no regrets. I think the decision I made at that moment was the right decision. So really looking back doesn't make a lot of sense, or a good efficient use of my time. So I like to look forward, but like Mitch said, I think there's a couple of great ones that are going to continue to get stronger. But for me, the 4 or 5 or 10 that may be in my rearview mirror, there's 10 times that going forward. So I'm much more excited about the future than harping on the regrets of the past.
What's a healthy way to think? I wanted to give you both like a minute to leave us with some last words. So Richard, do you want to start?
Sure. First, I want to thank you, Max, and the Observer. You guys are doing an amazing job. I think with going forward, looking forward at the way you're approaching this and embracing it, bringing in a lot smarter people than I, and younger and more ambitious is a great way to look at it. But in general, I think this is really only the beginning. I think I'm looking at a very, very positive outlook going forward. I think your readers should be thinking about the global impact, how, not only governments will mandate, but big banks, big PE firms, big VC firms are going to be looking at investment in technology and how it'll affect real estate. So, for me, I'm super excited about the next 10 years ahead. And Mitch, please put me on the list for that MasterCard. All right.
Yeah, I got you. I'll get you on the link that gets around the wait list, obviously.
Okay, cool.
For your whole family.
Mitch, your final thought?
Just like Richard said, we appreciate you having us, you, Max, since before even the Observer, and obviously the Observer family have always been a great publication, not just generally in our industry and looked at that way, which everyone thinks so, but obviously for my family, and I'm sure Richard's family, who's also, dear friends of ours as well. So that's first and foremost. And then, I guess just generally speaking, this is obviously a category I've always been excited about. This is a category that I've always been involved with. I have to kind of argue with myself on certain days which one to spend more time on, because some buildings are, we have some really sizable projects, and sometimes I take a minute or more to focus on a startup, because I think it just has so much potential and potential impact on our lives or on our industry and our business. And if that's the way it's going to be for me, I'm completely not only okay with it, I'm excited about that. So, we do have our companies. We're always going to do more. I think now, the best way is maybe how I got involved and helped start Built to really sink my teeth in more as I go into new companies, to really kind of, have my hands around what the impact will be and what the platform will be. And I think, Richard said really, the most important theme of all, and we do software and hardware and wellness and flex office and co-living, and we do all of those, but really the most important one that we're really looking into really for the rest of our lives is going to be sustainability. And it's something that's important to our company. It's something that's personally important to me and our family. And I think that everyone can make money there, and everyone can make things more efficient, and the operating expenses of your building can be better. But at the end of the day, also, we can live a longer and healthier life, which is obviously more valuable than all the things I said before. So we're really excited to look into that more, and we definitely will. And, hope for the best.
All right. On that note, Mitch Moynihan, Richard Chera, thank you both for being here today. It's great to see you.
Likewise.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Great.
Thanks, Max.
Okay. Sorry, excuse me. Okay, I think we'll get started at this. Thanks everybody for sticking around. This is our last panel. It's on flexibility in the campus effect. My name's Nick Rizzi. I'm the web editor here at Commercial Observer, and I'll be serving as the moderator. And I'm joined today by Jeremy Bernard, the CEO of North America for Ascensus, William Elder, the Managing Director of RXR Realty's New York City division, and Nadir Settles, the New York Regional Head for Nuveen. Thank you all for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
And so, yeah, we'll just kind of jump right in. Obviously, as, companies and tenants are starting to, return to the office, after staying at home for almost over a year, flexibility has been something, they're talking a lot about, and it's on everybody's mind. And so, just starting off, maybe Jeremy, you can field this one, but sort of, for, for landlords, sort of what are the challenges in sort of implementing a portfolio-wide approach to flexibility?
Yeah. Again, Nick, thanks for having us. Appreciate it. We're excited to be here. So it's interesting. We're speaking to a lot of our customers, a lot of landlords around the world, and they are trying to activate this portfolio effect, if you will, so that they can provide to the tenants, the occupiers, at the end of the day, flexibility to work in one location, perhaps on one day, another location, maybe in a suburb the next day, or maybe across the country on a third day. And the challenge ultimately is implementing that from a technology perspective and making sure that the
the employees at the end of the day have a frictionless experience. So so we're spending a lot of time working with our customers, making sure they can implement that sort of portfolio effect, and it actually works at the end of the day.
And I'd love to hear from both Nadir and William sort of on how you're both sort of looking at Flex now. Maybe Nadir, you can start off.
Look, I think the world's kind of changing pretty rapidly, right? I think there was a lot of acceleration due to the pandemic, but Jeremy's right. I think just stepping back, there's a lot of I think there's a lot of wants in the market from the individual kind of tenant base, the occupiers, if you will, wanting a great experience coming back. It's going to take a little bit of time. You've been sitting in your house for the last year and a half or so. It's got to be daunting to come back, and you need some things to kind of make you feel maybe a little more at ease. I mean, we've been back since last June, a full year plus. So I can speak from experience that the first few days back was a little weird, but we weren't out for a year and a half. So and we're seeing the same thing. We're staying in touch with our tenants and our clients, and they're kind of telling us what they think that they need, and we're happy to support that. But Jeremy's right. We do it. We have amenity centers kind of in buildings, and then we have the portfolio approach as well. We own 20 million feet in the city, and almost as much out in the mostly Long Island suburbs. But there's definitely the need and desire. So you want to provide it somewhere. So we have kind of the hub and spoke, I guess you might say, for amenities. We do have our own applications that we've created ourselves to kind of create that frictionless moment where we can get out to the tenant base and kind of let them know what's happening in these various buildings. And they're starting to show up. We've been doing more online content at this point in time, but as more people come back to the workplace, we'll be doing more in person and a lot of variety. And I think I'd say that programming, it's got to mean something, right? I think the world's shifted where you have to create these meaningful moments for people. And it's not just the gym anymore or the ice cream in the lobby or something like that. It's real content. It's educational panels about something that individuals may not have known about, like the best marketing approaches in consumer categories or something like that. So we're running the full gamut of what those programs and amenities are. I think they'll continue to change over the next couple of years and into the future, but there's definitely a need. And if you don't have it, you're at a real disadvantage from a kind of marketability standpoint.
Great. And Nadir, so how is Nuveen sort of looking at Flex now?
Yeah, so it's extremely comprehensive, and I think William and Jeremy certainly hit on some points. But to make it simplistic, it's a lifestyle. I think William talked about people coming back to work and they're gonna have to sort of reorganize and reorient themselves on going back to the office, the route to the office. Well, Nuveen's gonna make that easy, right? So we own properties in Connecticut, we own properties in New Jersey, we own properties in the city. All properties aren't created equal. We got extremely comprehensive properties to where we've now went in partnerships to build restaurants, to build parks, to build rooftops. And then there's other buildings where there's yoga studios, there's dock in the boxes, there's different amenities. And guess what? Everybody in our portfolio will have access to everything, as well as incorporating what I call their lifestyle. So today in New Jersey, you take your kids to school, and that's all convenient for you now for the last year and a half. And now you're going back to work, and you will just have to go back to work. But guess what? As a part of being in our portfolio, if your main office is in Manhattan, which the majority of our footprint is, but a lot of people have live in the suburbs and have migrated to the suburbs, but we're going to make it easier for your employer to offer you that access by being a Nuveen tenant. And your employer will be able to say, hey, you know what, on Fridays or Wednesdays when you need to do some things, or just what's convenient with your lifestyle as you think about having to do certain things that you used to do as we've gotten accustomed to this work from home, you can work out of our office and you can work out of our access office through Nuveen's portfolio in New Jersey, which is close to your home. It's only 10 minutes. So you can now have a dedicated space to where you can work. but then you also can get back home and deal with some of maybe your work-life balance concerns. And we think that's what employees want, and we'll be there to accommodate that, as well as, some of the suites and stuff that we're building to accommodate meetings. So, you may be office downtown, but may want to have the meeting in Midtown. And so we'll be able to have that. And I think everything we're doing, we're accommodating our tenants' lifestyle from our amenities, right? It was, I think William mentioned pre-COVID, we focused on gyms. Now we're focusing on everything. I said yoga, but Doc in the Box, and we've always been sustainability and health and wellness folks, but we've enhanced that, right? So we got a better articulation of how our air filtrations work, how much we're cleaning. We've used technology now that actually can sort of lay out where's the high touch points around communicable viruses. So all this stuff is in our articulation now as we walk the buildings with our tenants and actually tell them what we've done. But we also have always been focused on health and wellness, and we're putting view glass in our buildings, we're building parks, like I said, we're building rooftops. So all this is in a really comprehensive model, I think, to support what we call a lifestyle of the tenants coming back in the programming that we think will get them connected. And this all anchors and fundamentally holds together in where Jeremy lives in the technology, right? This becomes a mess if, one tries to go and book something in Connecticut and it can't. The app doesn't work. I'm frustrated using it. The user experience is bad. It becomes a mess. So we have to get it right in our collaboration with Jeremy and his counterparts and colleagues that are in the technology space that are helping the business integrate this, because integration is so important, and user experience it's ultimately what's going to prove us to be successful. And so we have to get that right. Technology has to be right. We're looking at several different technology, from just integration technology, but also access technology, right? If you're floating all these access points around, how do you secure that? How do you make sure people are going to dedicated spaces, the right spaces, right? So we're talking to people that provide access, right? And then you get this disparate group of technology operators, and you have to bring that all together in the background that's completely seamless to your tenants. And so that's where we've been spending a lot of work. That's a tall order, but we think it's well worth it, because we think this is what tenants are looking for now. One, they're looking for high quality buildings, but two, they're looking for, how does this building serve myself as the employer, but my employees as well, right? That's the question. And we think we have a pretty comprehensive response to that in all that we're doing. And I think Jeremy touched on the last leg, I would say, is us doing this globally, right? We have a tremendous footprint globally. And so now the first phase of this is tenants just going back to wherever your home office was, and then utilizing our portfolio within a metro area. But once people start traveling again, we'll set you up in Miami, we'll set you up in London. That's how big our portfolio goes. And that's what I call phase 2 of actually building on what is already a comprehensive model.
It's interesting. I'm curious what the other panelists think. It seems to me that the amenities and the offerings were more geared to kind of C-suite levels a couple of years ago, right? Where you had clubs and all these different things. But all of our amenities are now, and have been for a long time, open to everybody, right? It's a very democratic offering, so you got to get it right. And what you just said was true. It's making sure you've got it connected and seamless, and everything works, and also the ability to learn from that with the back end, components of the technology to see what people really want and use. But I really think over the last couple of years, this explosion is just more people, right? It's just a lot more people and the connectivity around. So I think it gives companies like Nuveen and us we have residential platforms and commercial platforms. We're more kind of focused in the tri-state area right now, but it gives a tremendous advantage when you can connect the dots for living to work or multi-city offerings to kind of meet that real democratic need.
I agree. Absolutely. I'll just say one thing, Jeremy, and I'll pass right to you. Just on Bill's point around, I think the model has forever been changed, right? There's been a secular shift that 10 or 20 years ago, landlords talk to the C-suite, to William's point. I think this is a B2C business now. We talk to the tenants, right? And then the tenants demand, by just taking that job, by the recruitment, right? They demand, hey, listen, this is the work environment I like. And employers are actually trying to make sure they fit that into wherever they go and occupy their space at, right? And that model has forever been changed. And I think that's what we do focus on. It sounds like William has been doing the same, is you're focusing on what do those employees want and what's going to make them happy as they come into the building, feel connected, motivated, and feel a part of something bigger than just maybe their tenant, their suite. And that's what we've been trying to do too, just connect the building, connect all tenants, create a community in our buildings. And it's all revolved around just the social aspect of those employees coming in. And Jeremy, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, no, thanks, India. And just I'll echo exactly what you said. It's all employee driven these days, right? It's about attracting and retaining the best talent. That's what the occupiers and the tenants are really focused on, and that's what they need landlords to provide the platform in order to do that. So 100% agree. It's about employees. It's not about the C-suite anymore. And Bill, yeah, I would agree with you. Also, what you were saying before. I mean, what we're seeing is a really an interesting evolution in flex. I mean, flex used to be obviously a much smaller part of the industry, the office segment, but it was originally for companies for their satellite offices or for startups or mid-sized companies now. And of course now it's now going to be part of 2/3 of the Fortune 500 companies plan on having flex as a significant part of their portfolio in the coming years. And interestingly, whether they increase or decrease in size, they're still going to be using flex. It's agnostic to that part. But the point I was going to make is we're seeing now flex be used by and utilized traditional tenants. So it's now just going up and down the vertical stack of the building. Whether it's a tenant you're looking to sign up in your building for 10,000 square feet on the 17th floor, or a tenant you're trying to, terms coming up and you're trying to retain them, you need to speak more about the 10,000 square feet on the 17th floor. You need to speak about your entire portfolio and what else you can offer that tenant and their employees. Like we said, at the end of the day, it's all about the employees in other buildings around the city, around the country, around the world. And that's what's going to differentiate landlords from the landlord across the street. So if you don't do that, if you don't have a robust offering with connected buildings around the world, then you're not really going to be meeting the needs of the occupiers right now. So it's really the conversations have evolved, particularly in recently in the last sort of 6 to 9 months, with our landlords as they are looking to sell flex to their traditional tenants, as opposed to historically that was different.
And
I'll add one.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'll add one. Sorry, I'll add one more point that Jeremy mentioned that shouldn't be underemphasized, because this is a major transformation going on for landlord office owners. Is landlords offer a service now, not just functional real estate space, right? And everything Jeremy and William are talking about, and I'm talking about, it's actually a service. And when you get into flex space, that no longer is just something that that's actually now a part of the operations. Right. And you're offering that, to Jeremy's comment. That's why I wanted to emphasize that, because that's a part of your service offering. And that's why that's extremely important versus this disconnected piece that kind of was flex operators and flex space and maybe you gave them a lease. Like, no, you're controlling that because it's a part of your amenity offering, which was not thought of as your amenity 18 months ago. It might have been thought of as a tenant. And now landlords is taking control of that because of this service offering in the various comments that Jeremy just mentioned. So that's a very important point, because then again, this transformation of office, right? And this is happening when you talk about the amenities and how comprehensive and more thoughtful they are. It's also the mindset of where landlords is going. When you talk about people, landlords saying hospitality, yes, hospitality as they're thinking, but it's more of just moving that mindset to a service mindset.
And Nadir touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to hear from you, Jeremy. So for landlords, especially global ones, I mean, what are some of the technologies that they sort of need to rely on to sort of get this flex approach off the ground, and what are some of the sort of the stumbling blocks that they're sort of coming into now?
So I'll go first, because Jeremy's got, I think, probably the solution to some of the problem. And when you think about technology in office buildings, we can start with the BMS system, right? And then you can start with other kind of individualized or siloed systems that don't really do a great job of talking to one another, right? And then you layer in, these amenities and the connectivity to the actual individuals in your building. I think the world's heading in a place where it can all be integrated. And the ability to learn from all of that is, you think about it, staggering. When do people come in and leave the building for energy optimization? So many different things, can come out of this to, just from a sustainability standpoint. As we're making progress in this world, it's difficult because all these systems don't really integrate perfectly together. So I think, that's where the next $1 billion is going to be made, when somebody can really put together the full package and it works absolutely seamlessly, and it's one solution. I mean, just for RXR, we've been fortunate enough that we actually were working on a bunch of applications prior to the pandemic, allowed us to pivot very quickly to create some applications for building access and connectivity to the tenants, and then ultimately amenity offerings. But we did it in-house. We didn't, go out and buy something off the shelf. Not everybody has the ability to do that. But it's definitely that I think that's the next leg of this is, where the technology's at, the best technology, who develops the best software and systems to kind of manage all this, because we all know this, commercial assets they're like living, breathing businesses, just one building, right? You need accounting, and you need engineers, and you need fuel, and you need all this stuff to operate, and all those things need to be managed and measured, and for efficiency. So there's a lot of really exciting opportunity out there. We're trying to promote and accelerate that, and do as much of it as we can in-house, but it's a lot.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Thanks, William, for teeing it up for me. But I mean, I think what's interesting is, personally for our company, we've been around for about 16 years, and we power over 20 million square feet of space in 170 cities. And we've been providing the software and technology and the connectivity for all of these spaces for, since the inception of our business. So it's an exciting time for us, but in general, I think it's important that in order for these disparate systems to all speak to each other and all work together, you need to have a solid digital infrastructure at the end of the day. So we work with a lot of these other different BMS systems all the time, but you need to have that core infrastructure in place that's secure, that's resilient, that's reliable, and that has consistent data, right? You need to make sure that you can track an individual and the access, or codes and requirements for that person, so that when they go to a building in another location, they're on their private network, they can get access to the conference room instantly, and all the other sort of aspects of technology. So digital infrastructure is key, security is key, resilience is key. Consistent data is key, and when you have that at the core, then you can plug in all these different other systems, and that's currently what we do with lots of large landlords like Tishman Speyer and EQ and others around. So it's the software and the technology is there today, and it's just a matter of implementing it in landlords' portfolios.
Yeah, I'd say that's the most critical part that keeps me up about it, because some of this technology is nascent, but that is the backbone of it. I think William talked about, like, amenities have morphed to so many places. It's content creation, right? It's like it's more than just the physical parts of the building, but it's also what you're bringing. It's vertical delivery. How do you connect your restaurants, outside restaurants, to be able to deliver? Like, we're keeping all this in an app, and it's disparate companies doing this. And so this digital infrastructure, I know companies, like Jeremy's company, been around a long time, but the other the complementing companies, some of them haven't been around as long, and like them having the right bolt-on technology or technology that sort of can connect together. This is the part where we're working with various different providers, because different providers bring different things. And then, but at the end of the day, we got to make this all seamless to the tenant. that when they pick up their app, they're able to do whatever they need to do, from look at the latest news and education and finance, whatever we're flowing through there from a content perspective. They're able to, book rooms in that building or another building. They're able to, order food, all this stuff that we're doing. The technology is extremely important, and it's out there. I think we're doing it all in one way for the first time versus like, hey, I just got an app and it can do this lemonade stuff, or we're thinking about doing it in a really substantive way right now, and it's kind of for the first time, and that's the part that keeps me up at night until we actually get it all connected in every aspect of it, because we got certain points of it, but in every aspect of it, that's the part that keeps me up.
And so, as sort of the amenity needs sort of move away from the C-suite, so what are the amenities now that tenants are really looking for, and is it important to them that it's in sort of one building, in your portfolios, or is it, are they looking at it as like a campus approach, like where if I know you have this in a different building and I have access to it, that works for me?
Having it in the building, right, is kind of optimal. And I think the next best thing is, in a campus. But we found years ago that when people were looking for fitness as an amenity, having it across the street wasn't necessarily good enough. So I think they want it as easy as possible. But just stressing kind of the categories, I'd say wellness is certainly a key kind of focus on what's in an amenity. I mean, there's certain activities, food and beverage, but I think people want places to go where they can kind of have that third space. They can just sit, relax, not just get away from it all for a little bit of time. Have the ability to go see, have medical intervention or telehealth or, things like that. I think that's where this is kind of going. I think that'll be, there's so many different things under the category of wellness that you can take it where you want. But I think that'll be kind of the high growth area. And activities, people, they want to be part of a community. And they want to, they want to have active engagements and meaningful moments. So, and those are wellness moments too, but I guess under kind of a different heading. But I can see a day, honestly, where every building, every individual building will have something in it. And I think the interesting thing is do you mix and match, right? So do you have the fitness in one building and across the street you've got the food and beverage, or some kind of a mix and match of all the different things in a campus.
Yeah, only thing I'll add to that, William mentioned the pretty comprehensive list of the amenities, is outdoor space. I think outdoor space has become extremely important as well, and it's sort of setting up the infrastructure. And maybe this was the obvious, but this is another part of technology that's extremely important, but Wi-Fi connectivity and 5G doing 5G to your buildings and things like that, and that expanding almost to the outskirts of where your building could be used as functional seating and stuff. And so having that outdoor space, but actually having connectivity out there that people can go out there and work and use that as that third space, that's important. That's another part that certainly is more important in one zone building versus maybe gyms and other stuff that you can sort of share. So where you can create outdoor space in one zone building is highly important and highly valuable, and tenants have been seeking that. Besides all the other stuff that William mentioned, that I'll just build onto that with that one comment.
I'll build on to what you just said, Nadir, and not to cause you more reasons to stay up at night, but it's not just about the Wi-Fi, right, in the outdoor space. It's about the secure Wi-Fi, because if you want to have that third workplace, if you want to have that distributed working environment, if you're going to be doing emails sitting outside on the bench, you need to make sure you have your own private secure VLAN. You can't have Starbucks Wi-Fi. That's not going to check the box for Amazon to come in as a tenant, right? So in order to actually leverage all these amenity spaces so that you can bring on these large enterprise tenants and customers, they're going to have to make sure that all these amenities are accessible in a secure way for all of their all of their employees. And if not, they won't use them because they're not interested in dealing with data breaches and all of that, which is obviously a big concern these days.
100%. Jeremy, I didn't expect for you to add to my list of things to keep me up.
Right. I'm sorry. All right.
100% though. You're spot on. Spot on.
Well, time already is, we've basically pretty much got a minute left, so, flew right by, but, I want to throw it to each one of you to see if you have any last words or, anything else you want to add. Dear, you're on my screen, so you want to start?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nick, for inviting and moderating this panel, and to Max and the rest of the team at Commercial Observer. It's always fun. To Will and Jeremy here. I just say, listen, we talk a lot about amenities. I think that is what's going to drive traction to our buildings. And I think the programming and the thoughtfulness and the security, protection, it's all going to be driven by technology. That's going to be the bedrock of it, right? And that's where sort of collaboration and partnership with Jeremy and firms alike is going to be Landlords' new sort of rooms in the strategic room.
And William?
Look, I think for me, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I can honestly say this is probably the most exciting time in my career. I mean, I've done big deals and developments and, the full gamut, but just as far as the integration of technology and hospitality, and, just the integration of campus, whether it be residential and commercial office, kind of working together. It's so exciting. And I think, certainly from a technology standpoint, we're certainly at the beginning, not the middle or the end. And there's just so much more that we're going to be able to do as the years go on. So, I think it's just another, great age for real estate to, continue its path as a great business. So that's what I have to say.
Great. And Jeremy?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Nick, again for having us. We're big fans of Commercial Observer, and you guys are a great organization and publication, so we appreciate it. But I just think we're witnessing a digital transformation of office right in front of our eyes right now, and I really think it is an exciting time, like William said, for sure. I just think it's very important that landlords get it right now, today, and that's the challenge for lots of landlords, and that's what we're certainly working with a lot of them to enable that and make sure they do get it right. I think some landlords are very few, fortunately, but some are actually trying to do it themselves, and I think that's not the smartest thing. But whether it's with us or others, I just think it's important to get the technology right that you're putting in place in your portfolios, in your buildings for the next decade, and that's that's what I would sort of leave everybody with.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching, and thanks again to the panelists for joining. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Take care, guys.
Thank you, panel. Thank you, Nick. I do have to say, I feel like I've said this I know I've seen this on Jeremy's before, but the art on the background of every single one of our panelists was really remarkable. So I just wanted to say that for the record. I want to thank everybody else for joining us today. For the opening session of our, I guess this is the second session of our inaugural series of the Ignite series. We hope to see you again tomorrow for the final day, starting at 10:30 a.m. We'll be discussing innovations across retail, hospitality, shifting urban lifestyles, and the rise of smart cities. You won't want to miss Dan Doctoroff, Nikki Greenberg, Adam Rashid, Shanti Eldridge, and others. I want to again thank today's sponsors, Cadre, Camber Creek, Sherry, Eden Health, Fried Frank, HQO, International Well Building Institute, Placer.ai, STO Building Group, as well as today's association partners, GNYCUC, NYC Builds BioPlus, and Women in PropTech. Thank you again. And please mark your calendars for our 2021 fall events. We have a really exciting lineup of programs on the calendar, including our 14th annual Power Gala, our Sustainability Forum, Miami Future Forward Leadership Summit, and the State of Leasing just around the corner in September and October. You can visit our website at commercialobserver.com/events for more details on upcoming events and power briefings. We have also dropped this direct link in the Zoom chat in your control panel. Have a great afternoon, and we hope to have you join us again tomorrow for day 3 of our Ignite series. So long.